used to love seeing his clips all the time. He was on so frequently. We don't get him enough of him right now. Right now, it's like Caleb Maupin to me is like cowbell to Christopher Walken. I need more of it. Give me more cowbell, especially when you have a situation going on. The talk of the town right now, ladies and gentlemen, we have 2 segments today, 2 guests. And the second guest is going to be Edwin DeJesus at 2 p.m. Eastern at the top of the hour. He's going to talk about the medical freedom movement in New York. He's a leftist that also fought against the mandates. There's very few of us out there, but he's one of them. He's going to come give us a report on Zoran Mandami. We're going to talk a little bit about him, his stance on mandates. We're going to give an update to what the people who were fired, who refused to take a vaccine, where they stand to this day in New York, because they can throw those protocols back on again, ladies. And this is where the right needs to learn that, they had no due process for all those people who lost their job in New York who refused to take a jab. No due process. So what do we tell you? It never stops with immigrants. They'll eventually use it on you and call you a domestic terrorist. That's why due process for every person in this country is important. So we'll get to him at the top of the hour. But the talk right now, right, is what's going on today, the summit. The summit with Putin and Donald Trump is to start taking place today in Alaska, Anchorage. This is something big because we've been wishing on a star. Hopefully it would end. Sputnik would be back in business. RT would be back in business in the United States. Sanctions lift, money unfrozen, war stop, ceasefire, lives to be left alive. Ladies and gentlemen, we want to get the scoop on what's really going on there. So we brought you the best expert. Ladies and gentlemen, Caleb Maupin joins the Truthwire today.
How you doing?
I'm hanging in there, Caleb. I've been talking to you about my health issues, trying to get myself better so I can have these conversations and do these shows. It really is a privilege, man. I know we're not breaking bread in Mexico, having breakfast together and just laughing and smiling. There's some serious news going on over here. And when it comes to this area, I think that you stand alone. I mean, there's a lot of people who have a lot of great knowledge. I don't want to doubt a lot of people who do this stuff, but I think you stand alone. You have a unique perspective in there. Let's talk about what's going on right now, Ukraine, Russia. I have some videos that I'd like to bring. Let's go right really quickly to let's skip around real quick. Okay, so we have the first one right here. This is Trump talking about there will be a meeting between them. But I want you to read the room. In other words, what Donald Trump is saying here. Let's bring up the first one. There's a tone to it. Put up to Donald Trump there. The highly anticipated meeting between myself as president of the United States of America, not as the WWE Hall of Famer, but me as the United States president of America, and Vladimir Putin will take place of Russia next Friday, August 15th, in the great state of Alaska. Further details to follow. Thank you for your attention to this matter. This is when they decided that it was going to take place in Alaska. So the president seems a little optimistic over here and trying to read the room. I called you. I said, Caleb, are you just being over-optimistic and hope it ends? And, this is another case of the hopium. Or do we really have a shot to end this war and save some lives? When you saw the president put this out there, what were your thoughts that it was taking place in Alaska, and just your overall feelings on what's going to happen here?
Well, I think the fact that Alaska was picked is symbolic because, as we all know, Alaska used to be part of Russia, and America bought Alaska from Russia. And the rumor that I'm hearing, waiting for it to be confirmed, is that the way this war is going to be resolved is that the United States is going to facilitate Russia buying Donbass from Ukraine. That there's $350 billion that has been frozen of Russia's money around the world. Russia already considers that money to be gone. And the rumor that I'm hearing is that Russia will have their money unfrozen. And the deal that Trump is going to make as a real estate guy is that Ukraine will accept the unfrozen Russian money as payment, and they will buy the new republics. And that will be the terms on which the war ends. But I guess I do want to point out this war is really already over because Russia won on the battlefield. And I do not envy Donald Trump's place because Donald Trump is going to have to try and save face. He's going to be widely attacked for this because he's going to be accused of surrendering to Russia. And he's going to have to try and make it look like he's talking tough, and he, forced Russia to stop it, and he's got to save face. But at the end of the day, Russia already won on the battlefield. And that is what you have to remember here. The war has already been won on the battlefield. And it's a question of just how much is Ukraine going to lose even further, right? They're already dragging every last old man and every disabled person. I mean, they got nobody left. And the question is, how many more bodies is Ukraine going to throw at this until they just, surrender? And Trump is trying to arrange that this war comes to an end. And Russia has made clear their terms for a ceasefire. For there to be a ceasefire, Ukraine must make clear they will not join NATO, and the new republics are staying with Russia. And the fact that Russia has already said that there's been a ceasefire deal that is agreeable to them means that's going to happen. It means the new republics are staying with Russia. It means Ukraine has agreed to not join NATO. So that's already pretty clearly in the works. The question is what comes next, and we will see what happens. But as of now, Russia won the war, and that's the whole terms of this conversation is premised on Russia has won the war, and that's not the tone that Donald Trump has to take, because that's not going to be popular in the West. But yeah, Russia won the war.
Let's talk. Let's stay right there. I'm glad you're talking about this, because this is something that I listen. I don't want to be here in the court for Donald Trump and his corner kind of saying, let's go, and whatnot. But yeah, we understand that from the get-go, from the jump, Ukraine never had a chance to conquer Russia, win the war, balkanize, remove the government. That was never going to happen. Ukraine was never going to do that, regardless of not NATO and the West helping them. If we know anything, and I think that, I've said this before, just like in Gaza, I think they've been testing new weapons. I think that they've also been testing a few new weapons over in Ukraine, Russia. The NATO has been handing off to some of the mercenaries and whatever's left of the Ukrainian soldiers. You're right, because they've been wiped out, slaughtered. They have no chance on the battlefield to lose. But I've been trying to figure that out for quite some time. How does Russia end the war without taking Ukraine? I could see no way they can do that. How are they going to allow Nazis to live on their border, even with a ceasefire in place? Eventually, they're going to have to take Kiev and then take Odessa. And it'll be hard to take Odessa without taking Kiev, right? The way it's geographically located. They're going to have to go up to go down. What are you going to take it? You can't take it by Navy force. You're going to parachute in there or something. I don't know. But, Jamie, even the engineer of the show, would say, hey, you can't take Odessa until you take Kiev first. And I've been saying, you're going to have to take the whole thing. That in return, if Russia would have to do that, then they would have justified everything that NATO said they needed to do and why they were doing it. You see, here goes Putin trying to recreate the old Soviet Union. He took Kiev. I mean, so in a way, I mean, I think Russia is in a quagmire. I think they'd rather end the war now, keep the Donbass, keep Crimea, come to some deal. The whole deal of Ukraine can never join NATO. I mean, they can say that, but then down the road they can lie. You know what I'm saying? They've lied about everything ever since. The Minsk Accords 1 and 2 was nothing more than a stall tactic, right? So isn't this a win actually for both now? And Donald Trump is going to look good, the real estate dealer. I told you they want to take the whole country, Caleb, and then we're going to take the whole country unless I stepped in. Isn't this actually a compromise for both sides right here, including Russia?
Well, Russia could move in and take the whole country. I think Russia would prefer not to. They just want to eliminate the threat. This war was forced onto Russia, right? In 2014, the USA overthrew the Ukrainian government, installed a fanatical anti-Russian government, and they started bombing the people in the Donbass. And at that point, Russia said, okay, let's facilitate a treaty, a negotiation. They had the Minsk agreement, the Minsk Accords. And, that was supposed to create a situation where Russia wouldn't have to move in and protect these people. The people of Donbass would be reintegrated into Ukraine. And now we find out that Ukraine had no intention of ever implementing those Minsk Accords. It was just to buy time to set up shop for a war. And finally, in 2022, Russia had no choice. They had to move in and protect the peoples of Donbass after 8 years of bombing and shelling and threats to join NATO, etc. So Russia moved in, and the United States used the war to attack Russia. It was basically Ukraine lost its sovereignty in 2014 and just became a base, a vehicle through which Russia could be antagonized and threatened and forced to militarily intervene. And one of the things that has happened is that there has been a relentless amount of terrorism against the Russian people. I mean, that Crocus City concert hall, that horrendous terrorist attack that we saw last spring, that was carried out, completely carried out. I mean, the U.S. government announced it was going to happen ahead of time. And it was a murderous thing. I mean, teenagers killed at a rock concert, basically, killed in mass. And Ukraine arranged the whole thing. And the U.S. government announced beforehand, they said, oh, there's going to be a terrorist attack at a concert, we think, just to let Russia know where the attack came from. They announced it. And there's been, the drone attacks. People have spent their summer hiding in bunkers. And the idea is to demoralize the Russian population, make Russia spend a lot of money. But the reason that Russia has won this war is that at the beginning of the war, Biden and his allies, they were convinced that they could get the whole world to boycott Russia. And it didn't happen. India refused to boycott Russia and still did business with Russia. Saudi Arabia still did business with Russia. Israel still did business with Russia. The idea that they were going to use this, they say, oh, Russia's invading Ukraine. Now the whole world has to stop buying their oil and stop doing business with them. And the world was like, no, we're not going to do that. And, countries didn't necessarily take Russia's side in the war, but countries like Brazil, all kinds of countries just said, yeah, we're going to keep buying Russia's oil. And at that point, it was only a matter of time because Russia was selling oil, selling natural gas, selling fertilizer around the world. And they were able to keep their economy going, and they fought on the battlefield. And at this point, I hope that we see a smooth end to the conflict. I think that, less lives lost. That's what Trump says his goal is, right? He wants, less dying. He wants to save lives by ending the war. And let's also keep in mind, this could not have happened without Tulsi Gabbard. Without Tulsi Gabbard unleashing and revealing all the documents showing that Russiagate was a complete hoax, they can't play that card against Trump. They can't say, well, you're just doing this because Putin rigged the elections for you. They can't do it. They can't do it. The 2016 Russiagate thing was a complete hoax, and it's been revealed they were going to try and run it on the more recent election. The reason they raided Scott Ritter's home is they were going to try to make the case that somehow Scott Ritter had been rigging the elections for Russia, to have Trump win the latest election. That was their plan. If Kamala Harris had won the Department of Justice, they had raided Scott Ritter's home and all of this, and they were planning to run Russiagate again and cook up a whole other story about how Russia tried to rig things for Trump. And Tulsi Gabbard is revealing all the documents that show that they did an analysis in the 2016 election. The intelligence community said Russia did not interfere. And after the election, they did another analysis. They said Russia didn't interfere. And Obama said, I want another answer. And now we have James Clapper saying that cooking up this fake story was a team sport. That basically the Hillary Clinton campaign said, let's accuse Trump of working with Russia, as a talking point. And Barack Obama used the intelligence agencies to come up with a story to back up Hillary Clinton's talking points, in order to justify sanctions on Russia, in order to make it so Donald Trump couldn't make peace with Russia. It's pretty awful. So that's why, my organization, we're going to be in the streets in 9 different cities today and tomorrow supporting the peace talks. We have these nice placards. Thank you, Tulsi. Thank you, Tulsi. Because without Tulsi, these peace talks couldn't be happening. So thank you, Tulsi, for revealing that. We're going to have these nice big signs in different cities around the country. So this day, I think that good things are going to happen. I can only hope. Now, Trump says he'll know within a few minutes if this is going to work out or not. And, fingers crossed it's going to work. I know that Putin's plane is already in U.S. territory. Trump is already there. Whew, all eyes are on Alaska, man.
Let's, dude, me too. Even still, obviously I never worked for the network RT, but I've always collaborated, been on a lot of their shows. I used to go on the Sputnik shows 3-4 times a week, and I miss doing that. I miss getting up at the crack of when I was in California, just to go do a show with Garland Nixon or Jamal Thomas, and I really want to get that there. Let me just say that I don't endorse the Tulsi situation. I'm glad you are doing it, but I would give Aaron Matei a little bit more credit than Tulsi. He's been calling out Russiagate since it happened. I think a lot of us know, but once again, these last bit of revelations of sorts have been kind of like show us the words, and I hear where you're coming from. But, there's just a little bit of disagreement there. No big deal. Now, I did call you after we had the first conversation. I said, Caleb, come on. Are you this is the hopium again? You told me what's going on. We have a video we're going to play with the theory about the money release. But the thing that was convincing to me is then I put on the mainstream media just to see their language because they always tip their hat. Here's a clip of Lindsey Graham on Sunday. Now, this is the thing that convinces me most. His language about what's going on over there. He's always wanted this war to go on until every last Russian has been killed, until it's balkanized, until Putin is gone. Fight to the very end. But now listen to his language here.
But I have every confidence in the world that the president is going to go to meet Putin from a position of strength, that he's going to look out for Europe and Ukrainian needs to end this war honorably, and it's time to end this war honorably. But how we do it will be historical, and I'm confident President Trump will get a good deal for all. But I have every confidence.
That's the whole thing that gets me there. It's the fact that he says it's time to end this war. Did Lindsey Graham just say for the first time it's time to end this war? They're tipping their hat. Let's get right to the next video, because the next video is on CNN, and you can see the Republican analysts once again carrying weight for water, putting their nose up Trump's you-know-what. Okay, that's a given. But watch how the Democrats push back, because I probably should have went out there and got more, because they are, every single time that something happens over there, they digress right back to Russiagate, Russiagate, Russiagate. Let's take a look at this.
It's pretty much a disaster on all fronts, and it's a pretty shameful episode in American diplomacy, in my opinion.
Yeah, Scott, I see you want to get in there. What?
Well, they haven't even met yet.
Right.
And, he's been trying for months to get a meeting like this scheduled to try to bring the killing to an end, which we should all hope and pray for, A. B, he's been pretty tough on the Russians lately.
Really?
C, he's been in pretty close contact with Zelensky
Tough on
as
the
well.
Russians?
And so the reality is this has to end at some point, and the only way it is ever going to end is if both parties feel like they won. They're never going to the reality is you're never going to see Vladimir Putin take a knee and wave a white flag, and you don't want Zelensky to do that either. This has to end in a way where both parties feel like it was a negotiation that they can walk away from and tell their people, we got out of this in the best possible way.
Trump being with Putin and not Zelensky, and leaving Zelensky out of
it. How do you know they're not in touch with Zelensky?
Well,
they're prejudging this as a failure a week before the meeting even happens is
we sit
totally irresponsible.
No, it's accurate, and it's actually very
And what's the alternative? Just to let them go on forever?
No, the alternative is to support the Ukrainians.
Sure, I want the war to end too, but do I think Vladimir Putin is going to get us to liberty and freedom?
Well, wait,
no.
let me play this out, actually. So you think we cannot negotiate with Putin? Who are we supposed to talk to? There's two parties in the war. We are talking to Zelensky. They have been talking. We have been providing weapons to the Ukrainians. We cut a deal to do it through NATO, which was a good thing. We have the relationship channel open with the Ukrainians. In order to end this, there's no one else to talk to unless you want to invade Russia and overthrow the government. But I don't think anybody wants to do that. That's the only player on the field. We're not siding with anyone. We're trying to end a war.
No, Trump is obviously taking the Russian position.
Was he siding with the Russians when he cut a deal with NATO to put more weapons into Ukraine? Didn't sound like it to me.
He was siding with the Russians, put us on the wrong side of the Russia-Ukraine war, and that's a disgrace, Scott. And we should all be able to see that. We
literally just cut a deal with NATO to put hundreds of millions of dollars worth of weapons in the hands of the Ukrainians. We are not on the Russian side. We are on the side of trying to get a peace agreement.
I'm not saying Trump has a consistent policy.
Okay, so there's so many things that are going on because, look, I don't want to talk about the art of the deal here. It's kind of disgusting the way these Democrats just kind of digress to back to Putin is like Thanos. Everything they do is wrong. If you try to find peace, you're being a Putin puppet. I mean, this is kind of crazy. The positions that the Democrats have backed themselves into, and they're still doing it, right? Like we talked about, you got the Tulsi stuff out there today because that pushes back against the main argument that these leftist Democrats have. And I wouldn't even say they're leftists. I would say we're leftists and they're fugazis. They're just culture war critters who know nothing about geopolitics. You could see the lady who normally talks just nothing about culture war issues here in the United States. She's going to say Putin is bad. It's crazy. But on the right, I've heard the same thing too as well. I've talked to somebody, they've said, oh, well, Putin has not been, reasonable. And if Trump can end this and stuff, I'm like, who told you he's not been reasonable? It's Donald Trump. How has he not been reasonable? The Russians have been very consistent throughout this whole process. They said they're not going to give you a ceasefire unless it's a permanent ceasefire. And that means we come to some agreements on some conditions. Number one, you're not getting back to Donbass for anything. We're going to protect those Russian citizens. They're now part of the Russian Federation. Crimea, don't even mention the word because you're not getting Crimea. Once again, they voted in a referendum, almost 90-something% to join the Russian Federation. You're not getting them back. They wanted the Americans to sit down and talk about why this war began in the first place. I don't think that's ever going to happen. Like, that's something that they're not going to sit there and take their punishment and admit what they did. You know what I'm saying? So that's kind of, I know that they put that out there because they want to do that, but that's where I think there's going to be reach some compromise. But isn't this a deal too as well, where a lot of people have said, Caleb, that Zelensky can't cut a deal. He'll cut a deal. He'll get killed right away. Maybe he won't get killed by the Azov battalion if he brings 300 and something odd billion to the table to rebuild his country in agreement for a ceasefire, in which he can tell the Nazis, listen, the West is making me agree to this, but we got 350 billion over here. It's enough to pay some people off and shut them up. You know what I'm saying? Isn't that also the art of the deal right there?
Well, Zelensky's replacement has already been selected. The Russian security services revealed that, I believe it was in Switzerland, various EU countries met and they picked somebody else to replace him. He's out, and when he shut down, there's an EU, US funded anti-corruption organization when he outlawed them. And then they had protests all over the country, which Ukraine is a country in the middle of a war. You can't be having protests, but, yet they had protests all over the country. And at that point, he's on his way out. And he may very well end up being the fall guy for all the corruption. And we're now hearing that, Western media is starting to acknowledge the corruption in Ukraine. And they're starting to acknowledge, the fact that Ukraine is dragging people off the streets and that there's not a military left to fight. Look, that clip from CNN, they were saying, well, why doesn't he talk to Zelensky? The second meeting is already scheduled. Zelensky will be at the second meeting, according to the White House. They've already spoken to Zelensky, and he's agreed they're going to have a second meeting to actually end the war. The meeting that's happening today will focus on, some of discussing the terms of what that agreement with Zelensky will be. But largely, it'll talk about economic relations between the USA and Russia. The individual that they brought from the Russian side, one of them is one of the main promoters of the Bering Strait tunnel, the tunnel over the Bering Strait connecting the USA to Russia over Alaska. And that the Arctic is an area that is very, very important. There's a lot of natural gas, there's a lot of minerals, and Russia and the United States both have Arctic interests, and that basically the USA has to have an economic relationship with Russia. And the Biden plan of getting the whole world to boycott them and isolate them, it's not working. And so this war needs to end, and the United States needs to start doing business with Russia, whether you like them or not. They exist. Look, the whole reason this is going on is Russia used to be a poor country. In the 1990s, after the fall of the Soviet Union, they were economically devastated. And then Putin fixed their economy. He put oil and gas under public ownership. He set up two gigantic state-controlled mega corporations, Gazprom and Rosneft, and he used that oil and gas money to rebuild their economy. And because of that, Russia's a competitor. And the Wall Street, energy companies, oil and gas companies, they want Russia off the market. They want Russia to be an impoverished client state buying from them. They don't want it to be selling oil and gas around the world in competition. Well, Russia's economy has withstood. They've got a huge farming sector. They've got a huge mining sector. Russia's economy is very, very strong. They're not going to go away. The plan to economically isolate them failed. And so you have to negotiate with them. Russia is part of the new world. There's a new world beyond the Western financial system. Beyond Wall Street and London, you have the BRICS world. And that world is there whether you like it or not. And the plan of the World Economic Forum to have an all-out war against the BRICS countries while they create a low-wage police state here at home. You're going to live in a pod and own nothing and eat bugs and be happy about it while we march to World War III and just destroy all the BRICS countries. That's just not realistic. And the BRICS are going to exist. Russia is going to exist. India is going to exist. China is going to exist. And we're better off trading with them and doing deals with them. And I think Trump is just a realist in that sense. You know, when Donald Trump went to North Korea, one of his biggest supporters was Jim Rogers. And he said, look, I want to make money in North Korea. North Korea, they got minerals up in those mountains. North Korea, you know, the population, almost everyone can speak more than one language. They already make their own cell phones in-house. North Korea is a booming economy waiting to happen, but the USA can't trade with them. And, you know, as North Korea opens up, it's going to be Russian and Chinese companies that get rich off North Korea. Why can't America get a hand in that pie as well? And North Korea is intrinsically tied up with the conflict at this point. You know, there are North Korean troops that are fighting on the Russian side. And I was really inspired to see that they took the speakers down, right? South Korea took their speakers blasting propaganda over the DMZ down. North Korea took their speakers down. When I was in Russia at the World Youth Festival, we talked to the North Koreans. We gave them the book we published about the hope for peaceful reunification of the Korean Peninsula. And they basically said, well, thanks, but, you know, we can't really do anything because we're tied up with Russia and, you know, we're on the Russian side. So if the war in Ukraine can end and North Korea is no longer fighting on that side, then peace talks on the Korean Peninsula can resume. You know, and there's really a lot of hope there. So there's a lot of implications here. This is about the new economy of the world and the dying old Wall Street colonial imperialist order, that old global financial system. That system is dying. And its only hope is to lash out and just try and all out destroy the new world. And I think there are some people like Tulsi Gabbard and others that for a variety of different reasons say, maybe we can actually trade with the new world rather than trying to destroy it. Maybe that's a better way of doing things. You have to understand it like that. Imagine, you know, I used to play King of the Mountain when you're a kid, right? Imagine one kid is at the top of the mountain, top of the hill, and he says, all right, well, game over because I'm at the top. That's Wall Street. They're saying game over because we're at the top of the hill. Countries have got to stop growing. Countries have got to stop developing. Everyone's got to go live in a pod and own bugs. And we're just going to lock everything down because we're at the top of the hill and we must stay at the top of the hill forever. It's not going to happen. That's just not how it works. Countries around the world are rising up from poverty, and Russia and China and North Korea and the Sahel states. I mean, this great African leader, Ibrahim Traore, is doing amazing things in Burkina Faso. I mean, there's a whole new world that's rising, and America's only hope as a country is to get in on the action, join the new world, not declare war on it. And there are some people within the deep state who understand that, and there are some really satanic elements. You know, I know your viewers, you know, maybe have different understanding, call it imperialism, call it globalism, call it whatever you want. You know, the Israel lobby, the Rothschilds, whatever you want to talk about. There are certain elements that are determined to take the whole world down with the ship, right? That if they can't stay at the world, they'll sink the world into oblivion. And I think the bulk of humanity is saying, no, human history is going to go ahead. And there you go.
Well, listen, I don't share all your optimistic for all your points of view over there. I do definitely would like to see this war come to an end, but I don't think that Tulsi and Trump, for that matter, should be praised or looked upon or trusted to bring us anything positive at the end of the day, because they are Zionist at the end of the day. Tulsi herself, too, has capitulated to the Zionist entity, and I don't want to forget about that. I just think at the end of the day that they are running out of real estate, Caleb, and they have to end this, and they're scrambling to do what they got to do to try to stay in the mix over there, right? To try to make something happen over here, to try to be the number one reserve currency that they are losing a grip on. But the behavior hasn't changed of the empire. They're still kind of bombing and manufacturing weapons and not bringing anything home. And it seems like they just have a different war that they want to fight. And Tulsi's aiding in that whole situation by saying that, Palestinians, and radical jihad is the greatest threat to America, when she knows that we supported ourselves. We paid for it. We've supported the Mujahideen to Al-Qaeda and ISIS to the Contras in Latin America. That hasn't changed. The behavior hasn't changed. The sanctions are lobbied in a form of tariffs now. That's what Donald Trump does. So I don't necessarily agree with all those other points, but I think we're on the same page. And I do like the theory about the speakers coming down. Nobody knows North Korea and South Korea like you do. You really do own this space. I've been into symposiums with you before and learned so much when you have North Koreans and South Koreans in the room, how much they want to reunite, and what Trump tried to do. But he did get mud in the face from the military-industrial complex. They didn't want to stop the drills. They didn't want to stop the armaments going to South Korea. we'll see. But let's go ahead and play this next video right now, because this is the theory you had brought to me. This is the video you brought. And when I watched this video, I was like, wow. When you couple that with the speakers coming down, because we see there's other moves over here, because Caleb is 100% right. The North Koreans have been fighting on the Russian side. So seeing those speakers come down from each side, it could be a way back channels in which they're using the South to say, hey, let's throw a bone here. Let's end this thing over here. Let's look at this theory. This was on RT last week. I'm here with Caleb Maupin. You're on the Truthwire. All the links are down below. We got a lot of people watching on the Twitters out there. Thank you so much. If you're on the YouTube, like, share, subscribe, hit that thumbs up button. Here we are. Let's take a look at this video right now. Here with Caleb Maupin.
Well, let's discuss this topic now with author, historian, and geopolitical analyst Gilbert Doctorov. Gilbert, thanks a lot for joining us on the program. I just want to ask you, what do you think about this? Your thoughts on the upcoming Putin-Trump meeting?
Well, as your colleague at RT said a little bit earlier, this whole event is filled with symbolism, and I would like to unwrap some of the symbolism. While some of my colleagues have tried to parse the language of Mr. Ushakov when he was describing the agreement to meet with the American president, I say that the skills needed for this are not criminology. The skills are those of someone entering the Easter egg hunt. And what I mean by that is that we have to look at who initiated everything that is about to happen. That is Mr. Trump. Mr. Trump is known as a real estate man. And I haven't heard anybody pay attention to what that means in a given instance, other than to say that territory will be swapped. That's the least of it. As you just pointed out, swapping a little bit of Sumy, a little bit of Kharkov against a substantial amount of land in the Donbass that is not yet occupied by Russians, that isn't a very interesting swap, is it? However, the swap will take place because something else is involved. Now, before I get to that something else involved, I want to look at another symbolism, the date. The date is the 15th of August. To most Americans, that doesn't mean much. To Europeans, it means a lot. To Catholics, it means a lot. The 15th of August is known as the Feast of the Assumption of the Virgin Mary. However, it all goes back 2,000 years to the Emperor Augustus, from which the month of August is named. And this date, 15th of August, is the Ferragosto. That is the celebration, feast day of the Emperor Augustus. And who was Augustus? He was the founder of the Roman Empire, and he was the founder of the Pax Romana, the perpetual peace enforced by the Roman Empire. Mr. Trump is today's Emperor Augustus, and he would like to be known for his Pax Trumpiana. The point is that the day was not arbitrary. It's highly symbolic. The place was not arbitrary. It's highly symbolic. And the fact that it's only 2 miles away from separating Russia and the United States is coincidental, but not decisive. What is decisive is how did this territory become American? I haven't heard a word about that. By the way, it was bought. It was bought. It was sold by the Russian Tsar, and it was bought by the Americans. And that's what we're going to see now in Ukraine. And nobody's saying a word about it. But let's use our minds. Let's expand a little bit. Let's be extravagant like Mr. Trump is. The Russians have $350 billion worth of assets that are now frozen in the West. Practically speaking, they have written that off. In their bookkeeping internally, they recouped most of that money by the extraordinary profitability of selling hydrocarbons in the first days of the war. So $350 billion. Well, you can buy a lot in Ukraine with that, can't you? And the opinion of Mr. Zelensky about refusing or accepting the $350 billion in exchange for all of the territory of Ukraine that Russia wants, which is the whole Donbass, the 4 oblasts that were named, well, that's a deal. That is Mr. Trump's great art of the deal. And I haven't heard anybody talk about it yet, but it's just hanging there, low-hanging fruit in front of our very noses. So I expect that there will be a deal. And I expect that whatever Mr. Zelensky thinks, if he doesn't like it, he'll be overthrown at once, because the Ukrainian people would like to have that money to rebuild.
Well, that's a fascinating take, to be honest, about Augustus. And of course, you have a deep understanding of the history of Alaska and Russian-U.S. relations, obviously. But I want to ask you, Why do you think Zelensky himself, all things considered, wasn't invited to this summit in the first place?
His opinion is not wanted because the decision at the end will not be his. It will be the decision of the Ukrainian people. Either he goes with what the polls are saying, which is that 70% of Ukrainians now want the war to end, or he'll be overthrown.
I think the Alaska symbolism for me trumps everything, right? Like, why would Putin go to Alaska and go to Anchorage? They first, I think they first put out the EUA, right? EAU?
United Arab Emirates. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
That was the first place, right? That they said, let's go out there. That's a neutral territory. No, they end up come up to Anchorage, Alaska, coming to the United States to a military base, right? This is Putin. So that's the thing for me that means everything. Do you think that it's possible that Zelensky will get the boot right away, or do you think they'll make a deal with him in place right now for everything you've seen? Because there's been a lot of puffery from him the last week, right? We're not going to do this. We're not going to the EU, asking them to get involved and whatnot, and saying we can't do this. Putin will be on our doorstep. What are your thoughts on this since this whole week has transpired, seeing Zelensky's behavior? Do you think he'll be there at the end of the meeting, or do you think he'll be gone somewhere?
I think Zelensky's on his way out. And that, I guess I look at the report that came from the Russian security services. They've already picked his replacement. I've seen the calls for him to be removed. I see the reports about corruption in Ukraine that are finally being acknowledged. I mean, we've known Ukraine was one of the most corrupt countries in the world for a long time. You and I have known that, but they, suddenly forgot about that when the war started, and we're having to send every last dime, send your money to Ukraine. Right. And I mean, you were, all the people that were donating to Ukraine, they were helping Zelensky's cronies buy yachts and helping them buy luxury apartments and all of that. I mean, it's really, this war is going to be remembered as one of the biggest money laundering operations in history. I mean, it was a scam from the beginning, and it looks like they're going to make Zelensky the fall guy for it, and they're already moving to remove him. So we'll see if he ends up being the guy signing the treaty, or if they have another Ukrainian leader do it. But it looks like he's on his way out. I did want to also add, in that interview, I found the part about the symbolism of Alaska to be very, very convincing. I wasn't sure about the other stuff about Pax Romana and about the Catholic thing, but it is important to note that a lot of the people in Trump's administration who are more anti-war tend to be traditionalist Catholics. I know that, for example, who was the guy from Breitbart, right? He hangs out with traditionalist Catholics. What's his name? I can't remember his name now. It's slipping my mind, but that guy, is a traditionalist Catholic, and that Tucker Carlson has relationships with the traditional Catholic crowd.
You're not talking about Lee, are you?
No. But the fact that they would pick an important, Catholic day, that may have important meaning, and that there are a lot of traditional Catholics that are rising. Steve Bannon is
Bannon,
Steve Bannon, tends to
Zionist Steve Bannon, right?
Yeah. Well, and on top of that, the other thing is the Pax Romana thing. Apparently that is something that's being widely discussed. Apparently, Mark Zuckerberg's hero is Emperor Caesar Augustus. And that the idea, Pax Romana was that Rome ruled the entire world and there were no wars because Rome ruled. And apparently Caesar Augustus is the obsession personally of Mark Zuckerberg. He has pictures of him. He fantasizes that he's him. There were all kinds of news articles about it. One aspect of this, though, that is important to point out why they're going to Alaska is that it's a security thing. If Putin flies across the European Union, he's got to have like 20, 40 different planes escorting his plane to make sure they don't try to shoot him down, right? Whereas most of flying to Alaska, except for the very final stretch, is on Russian territory, right? He flies, across Russia, he lands in the Far East, and then he flies over the Bering Sea, and there he is. It's rather convenient to have the meeting there. I understand that there's some talk of the second meeting also being in Alaska, which is interesting. But you have to remember, why did Trump say that he wanted Canada to join with the United States? You remember that? And that Alberta, Canada, and all of them, they want to join with the United States. There's referendums. There's been all these calls among the trucker convoy people in Canada. They want, Canada to join with the USA. And, you know, now we have the talk of the Bering Sea Bridge and all of this. Look, there is a divide among the elite. Some of the business owners and the billionaires in America are tied in with Britain and tied in with the NATO countries, and some are more independent. And this is, they call it the Yankee and Cowboy War. That's kind of defined American politics since the end of the Second World War. And that there is, you know, there's a pull among the some of the American elite. They want to pull away from Europe, and they want to, you know, go further west. And they want, you know, they want pipelines connecting Alaska, you know, all the way through Canada, all the way down to the United States. They want a corridor there. They want to explore natural gas. They're into fracking. And there's a layer of wealthy people and people in the military and other things that are more Western oriented and less tied in with the Anglo international financial order. Right. And that the Council on Foreign Relations and the Round Table Group and the World Economic Forum, that's very much Wall Street and London. That's that old economic order. Whereas there's a lot of these, they call them the fracking cowboys that were back in, you know, that were opposing Obama and funding the Tea Party and stuff. And that they're more Western oriented, and that for their own reasons, they'd like to pivot the U.S. economically to be more focused on the West. They want, you know, connecting Alaska with the rest of the continental United States. They want a corridor down there. They want to pivot for their own selfish reasons. They want to pivot the U.S. economy to be less focused on trading with Europe and NATO, less Atlantic in its focus and more Pacific, for their own reasons. But I think that's a good move, because that will lead to us being more connected as a result with Asia and with the BRICS countries and with China and with Russia and with North Korea, et cetera. And that there is a fight within our ruling class. It's very important. You know, this Bering Sea tunnel that is now apparently going to be on the discussion at the meeting, that is something that's been pushed for by a number of different people going back hundreds of years. You know, I mean, during the administration of Abraham Lincoln, there was even talk of building like a railroad over the Bering Sea, somehow connecting the United States over the Bering Sea. And the British are very, very opposed to it. It's been the British and the Wall Street crowd that are tied in with the London Stock Exchange. They've been very opposed to that. Abraham Lincoln, Henry Charles Carey, various people throughout American history have said it's a good idea because it would lead to the United States being more tied in with the East and less tied in with that British Empire financial order. This is geopolitics, and this is something we don't talk about as much in America. But you know, but the political systems have a lot to do with geography and where you're located. And there's always been a push and pull in America. Are we going to be an Atlanticist country, or are we going to be a civilization of the land like they have in Russia and China and Eurasia? And this is the kind of stuff they talk about in Russia and in China nowadays, about the push and pull between civilization of the sea and civilization of the land, thalassocracy and Atlanticism versus Eurasianism and continentalism. And I think there is a continental ruling class that is more oriented toward trading with Asia and more oriented toward pivoting the U.S. economy to be more focused on the Western areas. And that's why Alaska is so important.
I'd like to say that Ukraine is not giving up without a fight. At least some of the people who want this war to continue on in Ukraine. Did you see, Caleb? I don't know if you saw it. I'm going to bring it up real quick. But there's actually, let me bring it up real quick, a lot of protesters that are in, let me get the right button, this little thing, in Alaska right now for Ukraine. Here they are, throwing their last bit out. Ukrainians protesting in Alaska. Any one of them could head back to Ukraine and fight, but they prefer to chill on the backs of American taxpayers, expecting someone else to do the fighting for them. To them, this war is just a show. Real Ukrainians in Ukraine want peace now. We crossed fingers. We cross fingers. The summit brings lasting peace. Just really quickly to show. And I think there's a lot of this that's been going on too as well. We've seen a lot of this staged in D.C. Could you speak on what you think that Ukrainians want? You said there were protests all over Ukraine to end the war. These are Ukrainians protesting in Alaska to keep the war going. Your thoughts on when you see this here in Alaska?
Well, first of all, why aren't these people in Ukraine, right? They're drafting people over the age of 60 to go fight in Ukraine. All the men there, at least, if they were really serious about it, they should They should go to Ukraine and throw their body into this meat grinder that they want to keep going. The other thing is that Putin abducted kids thing. That has been debunked over and over and over again. Russia has gone out of its way to try and return kids to their parents. They're not kidnapping children. That is that the UN, they have gotten up and shown the facts over and over and over again. That is just a pure propaganda thing that it doesn't bear any matching with reality. And Russia has bent over backwards to accommodate, returning children that are orphaned by this war to their families. They're not kidnapping Ukrainian children. That's not happening, right? Children get lost in conflicts. That's how these things tend to happen. War is a horrendous thing, and, if children get lost, the policy of the Russian government is to try and connect them with their families. And get those kids back to their parents, right? But in a war situation where people are fleeing to different countries, it can be very difficult. But the idea that Russia is dragging Ukrainian kids off the street and, having them adopted by Russian parents is a big plot to destroy the Ukrainian way of life or something. It's so stupid. Right now, I am so glad that we're finally getting revelations, again, from Tulsi Gabbard, showing what Russia has been saying from the beginning of this war. Ukraine is violating human rights. Ukraine tortures people. Russia, you should see what they've revealed at the United Nations about how they're doing experiments with chemical weapons on the disabled in mental hospitals and how they were, the bio labs. You remember the bio labs? They were developing chemical weapons that would target Russians on an ethnic basis, right? Can you imagine that? When I was in Russia, when I spoke to the Russian president, I got up and I asked him a question at a forum. I talked about, hope for peace between our two countries. And when he responded, he said to me, your country, Caleb, United States, you invaded Iraq because there were rumors that they had weapons of mass destruction. There were rumors that Iraq had weapons of mass destruction. Turned out they weren't true. Iraq's on the other side of the planet. We got Ukraine right on our border. Not only do they have weapons of mass destruction, but they had facilities where they were developing all kinds of biological and chemical and dangerous weapons designed specifically to attack Russians, right? Can you imagine that? It's not, we invade Iraq because on the other side of the planet, they might have weapons of mass destruction. This is a country right on their border that has got all kinds of bio labs and weapons, and they're doing all kinds of sick, demented experiments to develop all kinds of weapons with which they can specifically wipe out the Russians. You expect the Russians to just sit back and do nothing about it. Tearing down the World War II memorials. One thing I will say, I try not to get too fired up here, so I'm trying not to get in too much of a dark place, but sometimes I get annoyed. Have you noticed how everyone's a Nazi? Everyone's a Nazi. You're a Nazi. I'm a Nazi. Nazi, Nazi, Nazi. Everyone's a Nazi. Except the actual Nazis in Ukraine, except for the people that are tearing down the World War II memorials and saying that Stepan Bandera, who collaborated with Hitler and rounded up Jews and took them to the concentration camps, except for them, right? You've got a whole bunch of Ukrainian elements that are not the majority. They're an extremist group that's been cultivated by our government, less than 25% of the population that wants to keep this war going. But these people are literally Nazis. And they look the other way. Trump has the stage at a CPAC rally shaped funny. Oh, that must be Nazi, right? Trump tweets and he moves his hand some way. That must be secret Nazi. But you got actual Nazis in Ukraine who tear down World War II memorials, say Hitler was right, say Stepan Bandera was right. And that's fine. That's, it's beyond me. The double standards. There's this weird Nazi phobia, Nazis everywhere. They see Nazis under every rock. It's almost like, it's Seinfeld wasn't one of Seinfeld's relatives, he's he thinks everyone's a Nazi. He's like, I think that guy's a Nazi or so. Yeah. It's that's what our mainstream media has become. But yet there's actual Nazis right in front of our face who say, have a historical revisionist narrative of World War II. And no one says anything about it. And I've been seeing this for years. I went to college in Cleveland. There's a very big Ukrainian American population in Parma, which is like a suburb of Cleveland, right? A lot of Ukrainian folks there. And, I was quite openly a communist in those college days, and they all very opposed to it. And they would say, oh, my goodness, Stalin killed more people than Hitler, and communism is the most evil thing ever. Yeah. And I would say to them, what are you talking about? And, 2 minutes into the conversation, they're telling me the Holocaust didn't happen, that, Hitler was actually misunderstood and he was going to rescue the Ukrainians from the evil communists and all this. And I would say to people, do you not hear this? These people are Nazis. And they would say, well, Caleb, they lived under communism, and communism is just so bad, it makes it okay to be a Nazi. We have this weird double standard in America where, We, in the name of anti-communism, we have aligned ourselves with some of the most brutal dictators and mass murderers around the world. And it's like, well, they're against communism, right? And what's weird is that it's the right, the conservatives, that tend to be more in favor of peace with Russia. But yet I still hear this kind of thing, claiming that Stalin killed hundreds of millions of Christians and all this stuff that just doesn't match reality. So it's very weird. American politics is in a very, very strange moment. Ron Paul, he just had his birthday. A lot of great anti-war activists were honoring Ron Paul. I know the Ron Paul Institute is about to have a big seminar, I think tomorrow, right, in Washington, D.C. And they're one of the most anti-war voices. But they're also one of the main, anti-communist, kind of John Birch Society, libertarian, everyone, communist conspiracy. So American politics is not like politics anywhere else. What we need is an anti-war movement. We need an anti-war movement. And honestly, we need the new economy to set up shop in America. And that's why the fact that they're talking about trade with Russia at this upcoming seminar, this upcoming meeting that's happening in a few hours, that's important. We need there to be more business ties between America and Russia, between America and China and India. We need a section of our economy that is not going down with the ship of Western imperialism. We need a section of our economy that is investing where the growth is happening in the BRICS sector. And that can lay the basis for building a new wing of American politics to beat back the power of the big monopolies. We need an anti-monopoly coalition against the big monopolies, small business owners, working class folks, anybody who wants to stop the march toward World War III and stop the low-wage police state. That's what we need more than anything in this country. That's what Center for Political Innovation is determined to build. You know it more than anybody. Left and right doesn't explain anything nowadays. It doesn't. I mean, you on the red team, the blue team, it doesn't explain where you're at on any of these issues.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the blue team has been ridiculous in their narratives leading up to this whole mission. I mean, the fact is, this is a peace mission, right? Like, we want peace here, no matter what, no matter how you feel about Donald Trump. And don't get me wrong, Caleb, I am going to be I know that the countdown, if this does work out the way it should work out, and we hope it works out, how obnoxious the MAGA people are going to be. We're back again. Here we go, whatnot. Meanwhile, in D.C., he's calling on the federal guard and sicking them on American citizens. There's a lot to be worried about. There's no due process for anybody out there. And people are justifying ignoring the Constitution, right, that says that, oh, no, immigrants do not deserve due process.
Right.
Yes, they do. Look what happened with all the mandate situation. We're going to talk about that with our next guest later on. The fact is, all these people lost their jobs. They didn't get any due process. It never ends with the immigrant. It only stops there. So I think there's a lot of things that we're going to have to readjust our energy for after this peace deal, if it does come through. By the way, Fiorella Isabel out there, really quickly, Jamie, just throw it up, has a couple threads out there. She's also paying attention to the situation. She's on assignment. If you want to go over there, she's listed details about what's at stake, what's at store, what's at play. You can check out Caleb's work. You can check out Fee's work. They're going to keep you up to date. Caleb, I'm going to give you the last 60 seconds before we take a 5-minute break and have our next guest come on. Stay with us, guys. There's a lot of people out there, especially a lot of people on Twitter. Everybody's talking about this summit coming up. I'm here with Caleb Mopp, and he thinks a deal is very likely to be made where they end this war, a peace agreement, the killing stops. Caleb, let me give you the last 60 seconds. Close out the show, and what do you expect that we'll be talking about on Monday?
Well, hey, economic growth is the future. We need jobs, schools, and healthcare. We need a government of action that will fight for working families and invest in communities. My organization is called the Center for Political Innovation. We're going to be in the streets today, throughout the country, and tomorrow, promoting the peace deal, saying we support peace talks and the Ukraine war. You can check out the Center for Political Innovation, cpiusa.org is our website. I've also written a number of books, and, this is all about economics. Economics is what this is rooted in, right? This is the new economy that emerged from anti-colonial revolutions in the 20th century up against the old dying Wall Street and London order. So you can check out my books. You can check out, I'm live streaming all the time. And, I love Pasta. I love Truthwire. I love Fiorella. You guys are great folks. And, you're always there where it counts, showing elections and on top of the election fraud issue. And, dare to struggle, dare to win. I'm with you till the end, brother. Stand strong.
Solidarity, my friend. Let's break bread in another Latin American country again. That's where we have some of our greatest talks, our funnest times. And I want to bring a lot of conservatives down there to let them see what's going on. I want them to see socialism the way I've seen socialism, which is more collectivism. It's in Nicaragua, people coming together to fight off the empire. It's more collectivism, right? Like we have to do this together, and they accomplish some great things. So thank you so much. Caleb Maupin is here, ladies and gentlemen. Go check out his work. We're going to take a really quick break. Caleb, thank you very much for being here. Let's let Caleb go, and I want to make a comment on one of the persons over there. Go follow all the stuff, Caleb Maupin over there. We're going to pay attention to what's going on. Monday is going to be a big day to see what happens, the Ukraine-Russia war. Thank you, Caleb.
Thank you.
Okay, so I do want to put this out there, this argument really quickly too as well. Let's see what happens. I caught Isabel taking part in the BLM riots live. Die, Netta, die. You don't know what the hell you're talking about. We were covering the protest. All right? Not riots, the protest. We covered many protests. Guess what happens when we were covering the protest on the right? The people on the left said the same thing. How can you be covering the mandate protest and whatnot and everything like that? We're journalists. We get out in the streets. We cover them. Is Fiorello a little bit more sympathetic to the left than the right? You can argue that if you want, but we were out there doing a job. We weren't taking place in some riots, and you can lie about it. They were protests, and if the city was burnt down, where are all those videos? Please, get the hell out of here. This is the stupid shit you get from people out there. But thank you for watching the show. It'd be nice if you drop a dime. Maybe you can go to the Pasta to Go YouTube channel over there and help us on out. Or you can find our links and support us. We're in the streets doing actual work. Yeah, peaceful protests die, Netta die. They were. The majority of those protests were peaceful protests. People got out of hand. Same thing January 6th. This is what you got. You got the team sports over here. This side saying that side was evil. That side saying this side's evil. And you get people in the quagmire. Please, where's my lie? I just showed you your lie. Taking part in the riots? What was she doing? You see her vandalizing something? Shut the hell up, brother.
I just wanted to interject. You said you can donate on the Pasta to Go channel. We're not actually streaming on that right now, but we are streaming on Rumble, and you can donate with a Rumble rant over there. Or still Rockfin. We're still live on Rockfin.
We're over there too as well.
Rumble rant's probably the best way right now.
Yeah. We let people in there die, Netta die, with their dumbass opinions anytime. We appreciate you. Bring them on over here as much as you like. Jamie, come back in really quickly. Did you see a lot of evidence of the people on the Black Lives Matter protests, which, by the way, they weren't the people organizing those protests. They were people who came into the protest that might have started stuff.
Really,
and bricks just conveniently laying out there. Thank you for carrying their water and their weight for their freaking bullshit over there. Die, Netta, die.
There was some vandalism that occurred, but I mean, it's not like they were burning down cities. The worst I saw was the police department in Minnesota, I believe, that they kind of set on fire. But that was the worst of it.
Yeah.
I mean, the rest of the country was mostly just normal protesting.
Yeah, that's it. I went out there, and the people from the Black Lives Matter organizers never pushed for any type of violence. They always want a peaceful protest. It's people who would join the protest that we didn't know who they were. In California, the guy who threw the skateboard at a state trooper that went crazy. Billions of dollars in destructions is nothing. Yeah, just repeat the lies. Show me video, pal. Show me video. This guy died.
And then there's the lie that comes after Black Lives Matter because Black Lives Matter turned into defund the police. And then there's the lie of saying, look at all the crime that's happening now that you defunded the police. Except we didn't defund the police maybe one or two small cities or small towns did it.
Yeah.
But the majority of the country increased police budgets, and the crime has gotten so much worse.
So Edwin is here in the
that's
studio.
The bigger lie that drives me crazy. They keep blaming defund the police on something that we didn't do it. We didn't defund the police.
Nobody did. We didn't even cut their budgets. We gave them more money. The Capitol Police got money.
Budgets. It's nuts.
But this is the same argument where people on the left, they were trying to take over the government on January 6th. Yeah, a bunch of Second Amendment gun nuts forgot to bring the guns that day. I didn't see a single weapon there that day. Please, these are lies, and this guy is just repeating the lies. Team sports, they get people to play it. Listen, we're going to take a quick 2-minute break. Edwin DeJesus is in the house, ladies and gentlemen. If you don't know who Edwin DeJesus is, you're going to get to know him. You're going to get to know him well. I invited him to come on Fridays. He's a new dad, so he's trying to fit it in where he can find the space to come over here and talk with us. But he's a lot like me. He's a leftists that kind of unfortunately was pegged as being part of the medical freedom movement because we were against mandates from big pharma. We'll take a look at it. We're going to take a 2-minute break. We'll be right back. Ladies and gentlemen, Edwin DeJesus is in the house. You're watching the Truth Wire. Like, share, subscribe, and please help us on and out. Thank you.
All right. 2-minute break. Be right back.
right, we're here at Truth Wire Fridays, ladies and gentlemen. I am Craig Pasta-Jardula. Thank you for watching the Truth Wire, formerly known as the Convo Couch. We are here. I want to send a big shout out to Matt Weinglass and Fiorella Isabel, both on assignment. Me and Jamie Cheese Slice, who is on the ones and twos, are here working. We don't get a casual Fridays. We got to come to work. But listen, I've invited this next guest to be a return guest, to come on Fridays. He's someone who was important to me. What's up, Fred? Somebody who I really kind of looked to at a point when I was kind of feeling really down. If you remember, I was thrown out of the Medicare for All protest that were organized from they had a central organization and they kicked it down to individual organizers on the ground in New York, California, Seattle, Florida, North Carolina, everywhere around the states. Unfortunately, because of my views on COVID and the vaccine, I was thrown off the stage and I wasn't able to act. I thought it was ridiculous. I could not understand it. I knew that at the Bernie Sanders Diner in Los Angeles, where it was simply, it's not a real diner, it was just a organizing hub. One of the biggest enemies out there of the leftist progressive movement, the grassroots movement, was the pharmaceutical companies and the fact that they had a grip on the whole system and it wouldn't allow us to be one of the only industrialized nations to not have a healthcare program for everybody. Now, listen, that's a whole argument in itself. What it should be, what happens, should we have a universal system? I don't know what it would look like, but I do believe that healthcare is a human right. I do believe that, right? And I would say we should have a system here in the United States where people can get healthcare. The whole system's screwed up, guys. I've been going through this illness for the last 4.5, 5 months. I've been having chronic inflammation, trying to get it under control. I've applied for Medicaid. I've gotten it. I've been dealing with Western medicine, Eastern medicine, Chinese medicine, alternative medicine. The whole system is all messed up. And also, too, the fact that we have a sick care system, not a healthcare system in the United States. Well, there were a few people out there who I kind of looked up to, who were leftists, who had the same opinions about as I did on immigration, where a lot of Trumpers are xenophobic, neo-xenophobic at this point. You can call it racism if you want. You can argue that point. But the fact that they think that immigration is the biggest problem without looking at the actual cause of migration to begin with. Somebody who felt with me as far as being an anti-imperialist, somebody who agreed on a lot of issues that, like, let's say, Dr. Cornel West would agree on. But we did have some disagreements on other areas when it came to Dr. Cornel West. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to bring him on in. I'm going to let him introduce himself and let him tell you a little bit about himself. I'm mumbling over here. Edwin DeJesus joins the show, and hopefully he'll be joining us on Fridays. How you doing, Edwin?
Hey, Pasta. Thanks for having me. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Edwin DeJesus, and thank you for that wonderful introduction, Pasta. The Medicare for All movement has always been my number one issue. I ran for a city council in New York City back in 2021, and the biggest issues that were important to me were about healthcare and making sure that we were, insured, adequately insured, and most importantly, having bodily autonomy. And as you spoke to before, we tend to put people in boxes and say, well, if you support medical freedom, you must be right wing, or if you support pro-choice, you must be left wing. But I think in the end, you can be pro bodily autonomy regardless of your ideology. And it doesn't have to be on this left or right spectrum. It's really the bottom 99% versus the 1% of people in charge calling all the shots and telling us what we can and can't do with our bodies. And so I think we should be able to do, what we want. It's our choice. And that includes, obviously, vaccination, especially the COVID shots, which, as we know, didn't stop transmission. And in some cases for young men, particularly my age, 18 to 24, at least at the time of the pandemic, the second shot of Moderna was giving 1 in 5,000 of those young men myocarditis, heart inflammation. And so it was banned in the Scandinavian countries. And we know now, after years later, that the courts have even ruled that mandates were unjust because they don't stop transmission, even though we all knew this at the time. We were called anti-science, even though we were the ones actually questioning the status quo. And so the irony during that whole time of, the government saying, well, here's the answer to healthcare. It's these shots, instead of actually, well, here's lowering the Medicare eligibility age to 0 for everyone so that everyone can have insurance. So it's obviously a farce. We all know who's in charge. It's the big health insurance companies, the big pharmaceutical companies that are making billions off of us being sick. They want us to be sick. And it's a shame that many in the left movement kind of succumbed to the illusion that the establishment was putting up during COVID and still till now, and buying into the narrative that, we have to give in our freedoms for quote unquote safety, which was obviously a false sense of safety.
Yeah. Well, you sound like a very privileged, misogynistic Nazi right now, Edwin. I mean, you look Latino to me, but yet here you are coming off presenting as a white man who watches Alex Jones and thinks this is a big conspiracy and whatnot. And by the way, somebody put up there as well, Pasta, you should go to other countries and see their healthcare. Yeah, I know they have healthcare. We have a sick care system. Before we get into who you actually are, and I would like you to send me a video. I forgot to ask for one of your videos in the hearing where you were there fighting for people who had lost their friggin' jobs in New York. I mean, Once again now, everybody, Edwin DeJesus, just like a lot of leftists I know, a lot of ex-Democrats or whatever you want to call them, believes that Medicare for all is a thing. Most people who are against the shot on the right are not for Medicare for all. First off, can you explain to us what you did to fight for people's rights right there? Because right now you're in trouble. Now, there's a lot of people in your clan. You've just exposed yourself like I did a long time ago. Because when I said I don't believe in this shot, somebody said, you don't believe in science? I said, science. And that opened up a shit can of worms. And they didn't like what I had to say after that. Needless to say, they kept me off the stage. Medicare for all. But why don't you explain a little bit where you think our healthcare system is and what you did during the pandemic to fight for those who used to be considered a leftist who believed in bodily autonomy. Remember back in the days, it was the leftists who said we're against vaccines and would make their own granola and have all coconut milk instead of regular milk that was awful and whatnot, and grew their own food. That's different nowadays. Now it's the Trump supporter who's growing their own food and not going into vaccines. Give us a little an idea of where you think our healthcare system is and how you played a part during COVID.
Yeah, well, as you know, Pasta, the truth makes people uncomfortable, right? I mean, you've done a lot of truth telling in your career, especially on like the Maui fires, and your reporting on that I very much admire. In terms of COVID, yes, if you go against the mainstream narrative, particularly in 2021, kind of at the height of the Delta variant going into that Omicron variant, people were just scared to have any other conversation other than what the official narrative was. People would get banned for speaking up and actually doing their own research, which somehow has a negative connotation or a stigma to doing your own research, even though that is the fundamental aspect of science itself. And it's true that if you are trying to make it in the political world, you will be shunned by the Democrats if you speak out against these infringements that the government was doing, basically partnering up with big pharma to exploit our bodies. For some reason, every single Democrat's compromised, even if they're not taking big pharma money, because they know that a lot of the public was brainwashed. And if you tell people that they're wrong, well, then they think you're crazy. And so, I was shunned by a lot of these groups, right? I've made protests to the DSA. There's no question that they are luring people into the Democratic Party. They take all this progressive energy, young progressives that want to fight the status quo. They kind of funnel that back into the two-party corporate system. And I was fighting that. And so, yes, unfortunately, instead of being allies with a lot of these people on the left who really ideologically could have been allies, there was a lot of tension between them and myself, just because I was going against that one thing that nobody really wanted to talk about because it wasn't good for votes. It wasn't really a great way to get votes, to speak the truth. And so, there was a hearing that I testified that was actually unrelated to COVID, but I brought up in that hearing the fact that, Eric Adams had continued what de Blasio started, which was a private sector vaccine mandate. So that was like pretty much the only city in the country that went above and beyond to not just fire city workers, but to make it so that even private employers had to mandate that you get that shot. And one thing that people don't understand, or maybe they do, about our healthcare system is that your healthcare is tied to employment. So if you deny workers their right to employment, if you tell them you're fired from their job, you're essentially getting rid of their insurance, their healthcare. And so that in itself is a huge oxymoron to say, well, you're a threat. Let's get rid of your health insurance and make it so that you might just get sicker or die sooner. Very antithetical to what compassion is all about. So one of the things that I was fighting for was none of these mandates, especially no private sector mandate. We were discussing this before this show, that there's still around 1,700 city workers that have not been hired back. Who were fired during it was like the last month of the de Blasio administration and going into the Adams administration. And that number also doesn't account for all the people who couldn't find jobs during the private sector mandate. And that number, there is no official count for that, but we know that it affected a lot of people. And in fact, I think it's funny that in jest, you were saying, well, hey, all these things you're talking about, medical freedom, that sounds like, you're a Nazi, right? That's what like the liberals will call you.
You're a right-wing Nazi, privileged white guy, buddy.
It's very funny
you're not
that
even
you
Puerto
say
Rican
that.
anymore. We're going to strip you of your ethnicity. You're white now. Nazi.
Yeah, well, I am half Italian, believe it or not. But the irony there is that, and there's a New York Times article that came out a few years ago that said only 28% of young Black New Yorkers were vaccinated against COVID before the mandate. So that means 72% didn't have the shot, didn't want the shot.
3 out of 4 guys said no. Yeah. They did their 3 out of 4 said no. Maybe they did a little research and found out what happened in Tuskegee and whatnot. Please continue, because I do have a question, because everything you're saying to me right now is, well, let me just ask you the question right here. Is it time for the left? And I put the air quotes up there because I think defining what the left is nowadays, is it time for the left to talk about COVID and the vaccine? I mean, do you think there's an opportunity now? You've been in this game for quite some time. Listen, during the whole Cornel West thing, obviously I got on him for praising Fauci. I kind of really, set the table for people like Jimmy to kind of follow up and go after him. I wanted him more than anything to change his rhetoric. Like he said, he doesn't shun people. Yeah, he was shunning Trump people out of the gate by calling Trump a neo-fascist and Biden a neoliberal. It almost seemed like a backwards endorsement of Biden's the lesser of two evils. He doesn't claim that it was, but that's how I think it came off. And I wanted him to change that language, but I also wanted him to open up his ears and eyes to COVID. Now, the shame about this whole situation is that he did come out and say, listen, I'm game to sit down and listen and learn more about what really took place. I think he said he took a couple boosters and that stopped him, and eventually he stopped. His spidey sense went off. With Cornel West signaling that he was even willing to listen, and the people that he represented a lot of those people who would call you a Nazi for saying no to this vaccine. Is it time? Maybe do you see an opportunity right now for guys like me and you who were on the left for so long, who are raging back against this rhetoric against the migration issue that they've created themselves? Like we probably feel the same way about migration than the right, opposite that the right does. Do you think it's time for us to have these conversations about COVID and the vaccine?
Yeah, I mean, personally, I do. I would think that, unfortunately, most people on the left will say, hey, COVID's an old issue. Why would you even still talk about this? It's a thing of the past. Not recognizing that there's still people who don't have jobs because of it, that there's still an impact today. And as you may know, the presumptive mayoral, the Democratic nominee right now for New York City, Zoran Mamdani, has already said that he would not hire back those New York City workers. So he said that this year in 2025, that he would not hire any workers that have lost their jobs due to the mandates. So that is still an ever-present issue in today's
Why do you think that is,
world.
I don't mean to jump in, but why do you think that is that? We're going to play the video in 2 seconds because there's a lot of other things. This video that you sent me when you heard me asking, I think on the radio, hey, what's going on with Mamdani? Where does he feel about this whole situation? Because a lot of people were calling in. I do a call-in radio show every Wednesdays on WBAI, and we were having a lot of discussions about Mamdani. The spell correct always changes his name, not me. So don't get mad at me, Zoran. But I mean, why do you think that is that way? Why do you think he's still standing there? And I think this video we're going to play is a double-edged sword. But why do you think? Is he just not getting the information? Is he capitulating to a base? Is this just an area for him to touch as a leftist that will make him lose votes? Why do you think he's there?
Well, look, I think it's no secret that a big chunk of Mamdani's base are people who are middle class, upper middle class, who probably haven't, well, I could at least speak to Mamdani himself, kind of grew up with a silver spoon, didn't really have to struggle much growing up, had a family that owns, compounds in Uganda, is worth multi-million dollars, making Disney movies. When you have that level of wealth, which is not billionaire level, but still a greater level of wealth than your average worker, there's something that they don't understand growing up, which is the insecurity that your average person who works paycheck to paycheck feels about the medical industry. You know, I don't even know who my doctor is. I don't see my doctor. The reason many people don't even go to the doctor is because they don't want to be footed with a bill. And the reason that probably many young people who were not interested in getting this mRNA shot was because they knew, well, if I'm one of those unlucky few to experience side effects, how am I going to pay for that? How am I going to pay for treatment to fix heart inflammation? Because, you know, without adequate health insurance, that's going to cost you a lot of money. And so you have to weigh the pros and cons. Well, if you already have natural immunity, why take the risk of getting heart inflammation if you're going to have to get treatment for that? That's something that somebody who has a good financial safety net and has a good relationship with their doctor probably wouldn't understand. It's a survival instinct. And so, look, the Democrats, they're kind of backwards, right? I mean, they didn't want voter ID, but they wanted you to have an ID to walk into a restaurant and get a cheeseburger. That's literally what happened during COVID. So there's a lot of hypocrisy that goes on in both parties, don't get me wrong. But when it came to specifically the COVID vaccine, there was just a lot of nonsensical things that till this day, you still have people wearing masks outside. You still have people who are stuck in a 2020 time loop. And so it wouldn't benefit someone like Mamdani or any other Democrat to go against the grain on something like that when it's already kind of been set in stone, that demographic in the way that they think and the way that they vote.
Let's bring on this video and talk about this. The person that I think that Edwin is referring to out there that are wearing their mask outside, I call them the cappuccino communists, the latte liberals, because they really are not. You know what I'm saying? They have this level of comfort, whatnot, that, you know what I'm saying? Like the latte liberal is the Democratic mom who, you know, can scream about that. And to me, there's a form of narcissism in their thinking, because they want to exploit that person, you know, and act like they have compassion where the right doesn't have compassion for it. That's their whole game when it comes to that. And if that person can't be exploited, it's no use to them. I remember when people in the Bernie Sanders diners, a bunch of white people would say to me, Pasta, it's time for you to step aside and let black people talk. And I'd say, well, yeah, Morgan Freeman doesn't like kind of feel the same way that the way you're talking to some of the black people I know. Well, we don't listen to him. It's like, you're making no sense. You said step aside, listen to black people, and here's somebody pushing back against your ideology, and you're saying don't pay attention to him. It's weird. Let's watch this video, because to me, this is a double-edged sword over here, because this is going to explain to people on the left that you're ridiculous for going along still with this ideology. It's 2025. He's talking about the next possible outbreak that could happen, which is something they left in play. This is something we haven't talked about, Edwin, is that it's more than a vaccine and a shot, right? It's about the way we live our lives and the control mechanism from the government. What can they do? What they can create a disaster or a crisis and then take away their restraints, their governors, and just start invading our civil liberties and making us do more stuff. All those systems are still in play. And you got President Orange Face bragging about Operation Warp Speed, guys. Wake up. It's a two-party illusion. This is Mamdani this year to a couple of Trumpers. And here's something the Trumpers have to realize on this one. This is why we need due process for everyone, including what you call illegals or, you know, undocumented workers. They need due process, because if you ignore due process for them, then the state can ignore due process for anybody. In this situation, no due process for the people of New York who refused to take a jab that the state wanted. I'm here with Edwin DeJesus. Let's take a look at this.
Two questions. We have someone on the chat, Marlon Bethel, right? Like yourself, first-generation immigrant, NYPD police officer, rose to the rank of intelligence detective, terminated by the Eric Adams administration without due process, without a department trial, without ever being charged criminally or civilly for failure to take a vaccine. What are your thoughts on that? On your administration, would you hire Marlon Bethel back?
You know, I struggle on this in that I think it is, on the one hand, can absolutely understand the frustration of someone who has lost their job in a time when the city is tearing apart so much of the same policies that were made at the height of COVID, and has arbitrarily decided which ones to keep and which ones to take. I mean, I'm right now in the state legislature pushing back against the governor's attempt to ban masks, which would sound ridiculous if I told you that a few years ago when it was illegal to not wear a mask. And to have all of this at the same time, I understand where that frustration comes from. On the other hand, I also do deeply feel the importance of following public health mandates in a pandemic emergency, especially when you're a public worker. So I think ultimately, if you ask me today, would I be hiring Marlon back? I think I would fall on the side of no, because of the concerns around the necessity of upholding that public health mandate.
Yeah.
And yet I also don't want to pretend that this is
Pause it.
simple or straightforward, because
Okay, so and big, let's make us big. I want to get Edwin's opinion about this. He's and we'll go back to that because there's another part of this that we can talk about. We can kind of bag a little bit on. I don't want to say bag, but educate some of the populists right out there as we talk. But he's pretty much carrying water for Big Pharma over there. He's repeating the same talking points that Pfizer, Moderna, and Johnson & Johnson put out, that everybody who wanted, people who were representatives of the military from DARPA on down, pushing this mentality that it's public health, it's a crisis, we need to do this. He's virtue signaling to them by also to his base by saying they want to ban masks. I'm going to make sure that you are protected out there and you can wear a mask outside even though it does anything. And this guy is slicker than Obama. He really is. He is politically savvy. Everybody's talking about, oh, it's this and that. No, this guy is more politically savvy than AOC, than Bernie Sanders, than Barack Obama. He is good. What are your thoughts on when you hear that comment right over there, him talking about all these situations right now? Because it seems to me that if they do want to pull off another crisis, another virus out there, that he'll play right along and slap the mandates and force everybody to stay inside their house. And if they don't take a shot, they'll lose their job again.
Exactly. I mean, there you have it, right? It took him a long time, but he ended up saying, no, I wouldn't rehire those workers. And to me, there's really not much difference there between him and former Governor Cuomo. Cuomo was the one who was trying to push for this Excelsior pass, where everyone would have to be in some sort of public database on whether or not they got vaccinated, and that determines their punishment. We're going to see this in the near future, potentially with social credit scores. And clearly, Mamdani is going to be cheerleading that on. He's obviously for a security state. He's going to say, well, if it's for the benefit of public safety, we should do it. He's already talked about policing speech. And so he even in that video alludes to the potential of a future pandemic and how he would handle it. And clearly he's for mandates. He's probably for lockdowns as well, if he's for mandates, although he doesn't explicitly say that. So this is just not trustworthy. And like you said, it's great political speech. It's Orwellian newspeak. He's, like you said, carrying water for Big Pharma, and he's doing it in a way where he gets in words, but at the end of the day, the policy is still the same as Andrew Cuomo when he was governor. Now, obviously, Andrew Cuomo has done a lot worse things as governor, but what's more dangerous about this is that he's coming off as a it's a wolf in sheep's clothing. He's coming off as a progressive, and therefore he's luring in progressives in a way that Cuomo can't, and yet still bashing them over the head with neoliberalism, but doing it more secretly and slyly, which to me is more of a slap in the face to the movement than someone being openly corrupt and openly neoliberal. He's doing it kind of secretly and seductively. It's gross.
Well, you got to take it easy. You just said social credit scores over there. How much more trouble do you want to get me into right now, Evan? Stop saying buzzwords. They're gonna set these progressives off. I don't even consider them progressives. I consider them culture war leftists. So you got Cuomo, who's pro-vaccine. You got Adams, pro-vaccine. That craziness, watching Kyrie Irving not being able to play but being in the building at the very end until Adams eventually, after the baseball players union came out and said, we're not going to force anything on anybody. It's like he had to cave, but he held on to the protocols for quite some time. Mamdani, he's kind of explaining right now that if there's another pandemic, he'll thrust the same rules on us again. Curtis Sliwa, right? He's the only one who's anti-vaccine right over here. If there were a fair election in New York, do you think he would have a good chance of actually winning?
if there were a fair election, but unfortunately in New York City, the Democratic candidate, even if they are a literal rock on the floor, has a better chance of winning against a Republican. Independent Jim Walden also against vaccine 1%. Sliwa's polling at above Eric Adams, but still not enough to win it. And it's hard because I'm not a Republican, right? And Curtis Sliwa, obviously, I'm not aligned with him on everything. But on this particular issue, I'll admit it openly here. In 2021, I voted for him on this issue alone. I was a single issue voter in 2021. I can't tell you this election, this election is screwed. It's Mamdani hands down at this point. There's really no way of combating him, unfortunately. I would never vote for Andrew Cuomo. I despise him more than anyone. But this is kind of like a really bad race where, there's no way out of it. This is just the way that it's going to be. We can have these conversations, and I want to be an optimist and say that we can enlighten people onto like what's actually happening here. But the fact of the matter is the people of New York City always vote against their self-interests. It's just really unfortunate. I was lucky enough to be able to get 6% of the vote when I ran for city council, and people understood where I was on these issues. But one thing that people always said to me was, hey, man, I really like your ideas. I like you, but you just have no chance. And because of that, I'm not going to vote for you. It's kind of like a self-fulfilling prophecy. The solution to that is ranked choice voting in general elections, but we don't have that in New York City. It's only in primaries, closed primaries. So therefore, they only benefit the Democratic Party. It's an illusion of choice. What if you really wanted to have a fair democracy and a fair election? You would have ranked choice in the general, and then you can actually have a much fairer outcome. But we don't have that, and no one that I know of is really advocating for that.
It is interesting, too. And when people ask me about ranked choice voting, I said it's a great thing, but it's so down the road, downstream for what we need to really fix with our elections as a whole. I definitely think it should be done. I believe in open primaries and ranked choice voting for primaries. That's where I'm at. It'd be interesting to bring it to the general. But that is a conversation for the next day. Let's play the rest of this since we spend a lot of time bagging on a lot of leftists out there. Let's set the Republicans straight right now and kind of tie it, because you're seeing a lot of what's going on. I was saying up until hopefully on Monday, if they end the war in Ukraine, that Donald Trump's only accomplishment was terrorizing the immigrant community. And there's a lot of people out there on the right who feel if they fix this issue, this self-manufactured issue, I think they've created themselves. If they fix this, if they deport all the immigrants, everything's going to change, right? It's going to fix so many things in the United States. So much that they believe that, that immigrants don't deserve due process. Let's play the rest of this over here and kind of tie it together to what you're seeing with the migration issue out here, as John D. Macari explains a little bit.
There are so many contradictions, and I think that one of the contradictions that that really stuck with me was how we had a different set of rules for workers than we did for celebrities. And I think what New Yorkers want is consistency. So that's where I am today, but I understand it's not simple, it's not straightforward.
But again, this is not really a vaccine issue, in my opinion. This is a civil rights issue. This is a worker rights issue. This is someone that worked for 2 years prior to this mandate during a pandemic when most New Yorkers were in there, and was previously infected and had natural provable antibodies, which the CDC said were acceptable as to had the same level of protection that the vaccine did. This is more of a worker rights issue. So, sitting there and saying, oh, I care about homelessness, I care about worker rights, I care about the middle class, when we see a completely totalitarian dictate come down from a government that made absolutely no sense. Because like you just said it yourself, Kyrie Irving could play basketball, but Marlon Bethel couldn't go to work 2 years later. I mean, to me, it's kind of a hypocritical stance, in my opinion. How, because to me, this is not a vaccine issue at all. This is a civil rights, worker right issue. This set, honestly, New York City back, labor rights back, probably 100 years.
I mean, I hear you, and I understand the contradictions at the core of it. I think my concern comes from the likelihood of, that we could be in a new pandemic, and the necessity of following the public health guidance that we put forward in that pandemic. To the places where I absolutely hear you is the contradictions of the guidance that we've been given thus far, what we're continuing to uphold, what we're rolling back. But that's the central core, the tension that I have is, in that moment when the science has us believe that this is the most effective way to counter it, shouldn't we have public workers be the ones who are the first to showcase the necessity of taking that step?
I would like to see the rest of the video and see what they had to say there too as well, because there could have been a ton of pushback over there. Do you think the best way and the most effective way right now would be to, where we're talking to people who still kind of have the mentality that Mandami has, is to say, well, have you looked at Pfizer's own data on the vaccine? Perhaps if you looked at Pfizer's own data, you'd have a different opinion. Or is there a different approach you think we should take to pushing leftists to look at this? And also too as well, where's this guy at who's talking about civil rights, workers' rights, and due process? Where are these people for the migrants that are getting deported without due process? Let's start with the left, is of what do we do to break through, and then get on to connect the dots about the due process that should be given to all the migrants instead of being sent off to an El Salvadorian prison without any due process.
Yeah, well, like I mentioned earlier, look at the governments in Scandinavia. I believe it was Norway, and a couple other countries that banned the vaccine based on their scientific findings. Does that make the entire country of Norway anti-science? So, everyone points to these countries when they talk about how their healthcare systems are better, and in fact, they are. But when it comes to their perceptions on the vaccine, for some reason, that's where we diverge with these European countries. So in terms of convincing people, well, why not ask these essential workers? I kind of find it disrespectful for Zoran to say, well, let's start with these essential workers. They need to be on the front lines of these mandates. That's rude. We were clapping for these people every day, and they're the first ones that we told, hey, if you don't get this shot, you're out. You're fired, buddy, even though you put your life on the line. And many of those workers, if you speak to them, will say, yeah, I didn't really want to get this shot. I was on the front lines. I had COVID. I had natural immunity. And so, it doesn't make any sense, but I had to do it to keep my job. That's what you'll hear many of them say. So, just go out and talk to people, because many of these workers will tell you, that, or even people who have side effects, right? People who are healthy athletes, but their heart rate has, it has been inflamed as a result. Now, they might not put two and two together anecdotally, but the evidence from these other countries, and like you said, from Pfizer itself, has drawn those conclusions that there is a direct correlation between myocarditis and pericarditis, specifically in young males from the second shot of these vaccines, more so in Moderna than Pfizer, but in both. Now, linking it to the migrant crisis, well, I will give credit where credit's due, right? Zoran stood up for Mahmoud Khalil, right? Credit obviously due there. But yeah, like you said, I don't think that people redirecting all of their anger towards immigrants is the right way to go about this. That's literally what the establishment wants you to be doing. The fact that you're getting more angry at your neighbor instead of the people in charge, including Donald Trump, including Joe Biden, that's literally what they want, so that they can divide and conquer us. Everyone understands that, if you've committed a crime, if you are a murderer, right, a rapist, there's a difference there than your average person who's in the country by crossing the border. Doesn't by virtue make them a criminal if they haven't hurt anyone. If they're just working an honest job, does not make them a criminal. That's what people are, I think, in my opinion, kind of failing to realize here, is that unless they've actually hurt other people, they're not a criminal. So,
well, what do you say to the people who go, technically them being here makes them illegal? I know what I say, but I want to hear what you have to say. When
I don't think by virtue of just being here makes you a criminal. I believe it's a civil penalty. It's not.
Yeah.
It's not. Yeah. But by legal definition, I think what you've seen is Kristi Noem and the spokesperson for the administration trying to change the definition of what the criminality is here just by saying it into a microphone. But on paper, it has not been changed. And so we shouldn't be viewing anyone who's here without papers as a criminal unless they've actually committed crimes, in which case, of course, if they've committed crimes, they're a criminal. But crossing the border and working a job is not a crime.
Yeah. You said without papers. This is the thing. I have this Italian family, hardcore Italian family, pro-Trump. They like the raids, the ICE raids going on. They think it's a necessity. And I can't understand it because I think my immigration is what makes this country great. My ancestors came over here. They were called WAPs, without papers. That was they gave it to Italians that came here, like me and you. You're part Italian, I'm part. They were called WAPs, without papers. So I hear people saying, well, we don't know where they came from, what they did and stuff. I'm like, we were called WAPs, without papers. They didn't know where we came from. They didn't know if we had a criminal record. They didn't even know what we did. But we were led into this country. And why is it any different from the migrant coming today? I also say the fact that we're in their country, we have bases in their country. And the majority of the people who are crossing the border, the southern border, are still from the Northern Triangle. This is according to their numbers. That's where the majority of the people are coming from. Well, we have 3 bases in Honduras, including a huge Air Force base. One of the bases where the militias and the military that work hand in hand, the Honduras military worked hand in hand with the American military, went out and took Manuel Zelaya out of the country and executed a coup for us. You know, we have the IDF, and Israel has contracts in El Salvador. They have bases in Guatemala. They control that government over there. They've couped all the leaders from Guatemala and for many years. And same thing with Honduras and El Salvador and whatnot. The only area where we don't have a military base is Nicaragua. However, the games that they're playing over there in Nicaragua are interesting. They've been granting visa and work permits to Nicaragua because they're trying to drain the workforce over there from everyday Nicaraguans and bring them here. And they're actually letting them come in legally, and the Trump administration and their followers know nothing of it. So it's kind of crazy. But I do start off with the fact that since we are occupying their lands, it's an occupation. It's not just renting a military base. We're picking their leaders. We're supporting their oppositions. We're funding and arming their oppositions. They have a right to be here. They're here because of our original crime and sin. And technically, according to UN laws and international laws, that they're allowed to seek refuge here if there's issues going on politically in their countries, and those are political issues caused by us. Is that a good way to connect the dot with a lot of these Trumpers? Because they don't seem to get it.
Yeah, and look, Mexico, 1/3 of this country used to be Mexico, right? And it's kind of messed up the way, and most people will just say, oh, you know, a lot of people think that it's just people who were coming in from Latin America. It wasn't. People were coming in from all over the globe. I saw it firsthand in New York City. There was people from all different continents that were coming in. And look, that was right at the rate that they were coming in, and the shelters that they were being put into was a problem, right? And the way that resources were being distributed so that and a lot of the migrants who came here before the Biden wave, like during the Bush and Obama years, when they came to this country across the border, they weren't given anything. They had to really pick themselves up by the bootstraps. A lot of those OG undocumented immigrants actually have a problem with the new wave of migrants that came in that were being given free stuff. And so there was almost like, I always make that joke about that meme where you see like those 2 fists kind of like holding each other. And it's kind of like the OG immigrants and then like the MAGA, and saying like, we both kind of don't like, you know, all these like people coming in from Venezuela or whatever during the Biden years, and look, the reason why we were importing so many people from around the world is because our birth rate's declining. And if the birth rate declines, then the empire collapses. The people in charge know this, and we're not reproducing at a rate where we can sustain ourselves. And so the powers that be wanted all these people to come in because of the fact that our birth rate was declining. So at the end of the day, you know, where is the future of our labor and our workforce going? Well, a lot of people are going to end up being out of work anyway because of artificial intelligence. But this whole concept that, like, you know, it's the immigrants taking our jobs. Well, why are we raiding cornfields? Why are we raiding, why is it that Stephen Miller wants ICE to be outside of Home Depot? In my view, that's just insanity. I mean, it's clear that if people are working at, busting their ass in 100-degree weather to pick crops, that they don't pose any threat to you or me. In fact, they're doing us a solid by being a part of our economy. Obviously, like I said before, if people are harming people, and there are people, who commit domestic violence, and sexual assault, repeat offenders, I think everyone can agree that that's not what we want, right? I think that's where most people will draw the line. Even people on the left will say, okay, well, yeah, obviously, if you're committing crimes, then deportation is the outcome. But if you're a peaceful person and you follow the system, there should be an easier path to citizenship. If you're paying your taxes and you're not causing trouble, you're just being a hardworking person, there should be an easier path to citizenship. And right now, it's very difficult to become a citizen legally. And during that process, you have so many people who are following the law, even people who have their green cards already, fearing for their life that the Trump administration is going to deport them, even if they are here with a legal permanent residence, which is batshit crazy. I mean, that's the work of Stephen Miller, who is a very evil person calling the shots.
Trump's going along with it. He repeats that rhetoric. I put that on him during the debate, talking about the Haitians eating cats and dogs. I thought was disgusting. I grew up in South Florida. I have a lot of Haitian friends, went to school with Haitian people, worked in the restaurant business with Haitian people, went to a lot of Haitian barbecues. Cat was never on the menu. So ducks, cats, and dogs were never on the menu. I thought it was disgusting. The way they repeated that. And also too, as well, I still kind of digress back to the fact that they can be here as long as we're over there. We need to stop with the empire, stop invading their land, stealing their resources, and maybe they won't be coming here to look for a little trickle down. And you're right, the majority of them are workers. And I don't think they're really taking American jobs. I think industry is another problem we have. We exported all our decent jobs out of here, and that's another thing we need to face. We need to start looking at the real problems and bring data to the table. Ladies and gentlemen, Edwin DeJesus, let everybody know where they can find you. I do want you to put up, Jamie, really quick, that article. This was from 2024, this article. Go ahead and throw it up, Jamie. Is this a video, the News 12 thing you sent me? Should we watch the video, or should we?
No, it just gives you the most recent numbers. It says 1,700 workers.
Right there. Make that big, Jamie.
Yeah. In 2021, they were reporting a little bit less. I think it was around like 1,300. But this is what I could find as the latest numbers. And again, this doesn't include people who were deterred or refused employment during the private sector mandate. Those numbers, there is no official count, but this is the city worker count, and this is still a pretty big issue. There's other things that we could talk about next time too, about city retirees and their healthcare being at stake because of the Adams administration.
Wow.
But this in itself, these are people who, as a result of termination of employment, lost their health insurance.
Yeah. So it's 1,700 people. They lost their health insurance. They lost their jobs. They haven't been reinstated and given back pay. And now they're just out in the cold. Where do they stand as far as going to court? They didn't even have any due process, right? This is nothing. No due process for these people. This is why due process is important for all people. Where do they stand as of today? Are they still going to get a day in court? Yeah. Can they get in court? Can anything happen?
Right now, the medical freedom movement has been trying to lobby Adams to reverse this decision. And time again, he continues to refuse. There have been lawsuits, and I believe, some people were reinstated with back pay, but not all of them. I guess it depends on which union you are a part of or which sector of the city agencies you are a part of. But it's clear that Adams is unwilling to unilaterally reverse the decision. And as you saw before, Mamdani is going to continue the Adams policy. And so really the only way that we can make change is to continue to join the activists that are still voicing their concerns about this and protesting. And if enough people protest, that'll have more power than probably what a court decision can make, because that's political leverage. And if we have enough people in numbers to wield that political leverage and actually say this can make a dent, in your popularity or in your votes or in your chances of winning in an election, that's when people are actually going to start listening up, and that's when politicians will make changes. But until then, if we wait and say, well, the next guy will do it, it'll never get done. And again, I try to be an optimist here, and so I will, till the day that I die, keep talking about this. But I just want people to know that this is an extremely uphill battle that I've been fighting for years, and you get burnt out fighting this battle. It takes a lot of time and energy, and sometimes you have to take a break and come back to it, because if you give it your all for too long, you get burnt out and you get disheartened and you get disillusioned. So really, it's about pacing yourself too, and pacing your activism, I think, is very important.
The thing that drives me crazy is the fact that there was a judge in 2022 who said you have to restate all those people, give them their back pay, and yet that still hasn't happened. Then you see Donald Trump arresting judges. It's all bad Democrat judges and stuff like that and stuff. It's like, well, what's going on right now? You got Adams over here not reversing the situation. He's been cozying up buddy with Donald Trump. He's running as an independent, moving away from the Democratic Party.
Mm-hmm.
Still, you get no movement out here. There needs to be some consistency across the board. Ladies and gentlemen, Edwin DeJesus is here. Next week, let's talk about those people who are retirees maybe and lost their health care moving forward because of the Adams and the Democratic establishment's COVID protocols and laws. Edwin, let everybody know where they can find you and go get more Edwin DeJesus.
Absolutely. I am Lights Camera Edwin on YouTube, and Edwin for NYC on X. That's EDWINFORNYC on X.
You know what they call us in the medical freedom movement over there, what they call me at the Defeat the Mandates. This is Pasta Jardula. He's a common sense liberal. Common sense leftist. I'm like, I don't care what you call me. I'm just going to be consistent. I'm against the mandates. I'm against people losing their job. I'm against people fighting judges in the state telling us that we don't have any bodily autonomy. Edwin DeJesus is too. Thank you so much for joining the show, buddy.
Thank you, Pasta.
You got it. That's Edwin DeJesus, ladies and gentlemen. That's it for today, guys. Thank you so much for kind of hanging on in there. That's it for the show. But we are going to read some comments out there. Jamie, did you star anything or not? Not really. I saw you star a couple things. Okay, Minx me once. Shame on you. Minx me twice. Shame on me. I saw that comment over there. I thought that was awesome. What else do we got? One or two more. Who are these people? Indie Left News, we love you. We're just a couple guys just talking about the medical freedom movement and talking about what we need to do. Give me one more out there. Thank you for being awake, Pasta. It helped that there were some wonderful people like you on the left who were awake on the scandemic, friendly, brilliant. Thank you so much. Yeah, listen, it took consistency. And I think the fact that there were some of us on the left who paid attention to the intelligence apparatus. We read some of those CIA briefings and what they did before. We understood what Operation Gladio was, what Operation Phoenix was. We understood these things, so therefore it made it easy for us to see the light. And it's unfortunate that a bunch of leftists are actually capitulating to Big Pharma and their cronies. Guys, that's it for today. I want to thank Jamie Cheeslash for being on the ones and twos. I want to say a big what's up to Edwin DeJesus and Caleb Maupin for coming on today. We'll be back next week. You'll see a little bit of Matt Weinglass. You'll see a little bit about Fiorella Isabella. I am Pasta Jardula. Don't forget, every Wednesdays I got my call-in show. You can go check that out. That's on WBAI. That's called Drive Time. That's it for today. We'll see you next week. We love you. Have a peaceful weekend, and let's pray for peace in Ukraine and Russia. Thank you.